My experience, my personal experience, sort of throws that idea out the window in a really interesting way, because I hear this argument that really, when you have a national award-winning coach, people will do exactly as you say. But the strangest thing happened with us, where we had a coach who actually had a really, a very weak winning record. He hadn't been able to win a championship in British Columbia for 23 years. And, he dropped down from the A level to the B level, and he still was not able to win a championship with his team. And yet, when we ultimately went forward and said, look, and there was multiple parents and 14 kids came forward and gave elaborate testimonies, they still stood 100% behind this coach, and he never missed a day, and they insisted that the problem lay with the students. So even when we have a coach who doesn't have an incredible winning track record, and when you look at the coaches that have been fired in the last few years at a high level, you look at Kelly Greenberg and Doug Wojcik and Mike Rice, it's not like they were the best coaches out there and it was just painful to let them go. So what is it about the fact that even when you have a coach who's okay, or maybe even in our case, actually doesn't have a great winning track record, and we still reverse the whole situation and we say, you know what? It's the fault of children. When children speak up and say, I don't like the way I'm being treated, it's their own fault.
So there's a phenomenon out there called the backlash effect. And the idea is that when you present somebody with empirical data and clear, correct facts about something, and it goes against their personal position, they will become even more vehemently argumentative about their position. Rather than going, oh, now I see the data, I totally get what you're saying, I'm on your side, they actually become violently opposing to you. And that's what I think we're seeing is we're now putting out data on this, that this is what it does to the brains when we speak abusively to children. These are the injuries that are coming out by overspecialization. This is what's happening, and instead of people going, oh, wow, we really messed this up, they go, you're just making snowflakes out of our kids. You're just softening the next generation. Or the other side of that is, the other reason why we just let this slide is because, and I'm going back to hammering on the education of coaches and the way we're doing it. You brought it up at the beginning. You said, we talk science. Where in coaching is science brought up? Out there, the people listening right now, if you're a coach, I want you to think back to all of your licensing courses and your continuing ed courses and how much of the science did you dig into? We're dealing with human beings. Teachers have to take courses on ethics, on psychology, on sociology, on learning behaviors, on classroom management, on child development and physical and emotional development. Coaches don't take any of that. It's can you skill and drill them? Can you run them till they fall? Can you teach the skill? Did you play the game? You can coach. Why? Because that's the way it was done 50 years ago. Well, folks, if you go in to see your cardiac surgeon and you're having issues with your heart, and he says, hey, I'm going to do this procedure that they've been doing for the last 50 years, are you going to let him do it, or you or her do it, or are you going to go seek a second opinion? Because most, as John Kessel from USA Bible says, most cardiac surgeons get sued if they're doing what was being done just 18 months ago. The science has changed, and yet we don't have any science at all in the discussion when it comes to training coaches. Did you play the game? Awesome. How was your coach? Well, he treated me like that, and I turned out fine. Well, then you can coach. Did you turn out fine? You're calling kids donkeys. Well, that's how my coach did it. So we just continue that. My parents smoked in the car with the windows up when I was growing up because we didn't know the dangers of smoking. Should I do the same to my kids since it was done to me?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And, smoking is the most interesting analogy because it goes back to what you were saying about firemen. And I wrote an article about the fact that in schools, we are absolutely vigilant about fire. We are terrified of fire. We take our kids through drills. We get our buildings up to code. And in actual fact, and we bring in the experts. We bring the firemen to our schools. We ask them, did we do it fast enough? Was it as effective enough? Did we make sure that no kid got hurt? So that we check all their names, everything. We know where every kid is. But, the reality is, kids aren't getting burned in schools. There hasn't been a kid die from fire in school in the longest time. However, there are 13 children a day in the US who kill themselves. And that is normal. We have normalized it. We read it in the newspaper, we feel really sad, we talk about bullycide, and then we go on to the next thing. We do not address it as an absolute crisis in our society. And right back to your point about smoking, when we saw it on X-ray, when we saw blackened lungs, we learned that it caused cancer. And even more important probably for governments, we learned that it was costing the system billions of dollars. Well, laws were put in place. You got fined if you smoked. You're not allowed to. You can't even smoke outside anymore if you're around a building. You certainly can't smoke in a school. So what I don't understand is, now that we can see on MRI scans, and it's just like a blackened lung, you can see scars on the brain, as you said, corpus callosum, the myelination is lessened. You can see actual, I don't even know the correct term to make it come alive for people, but essentially the brain is being wounded. And we are not going to make changes. Government is not going to step in and say, we have a youth mental health crisis, and suicide is the second leading cause of death in our youth populations. This is an emergency. Where are they? Where is the government? Why are they not insisting that, teachers, coaches, career counselors, you name it, anyone who's working with youth needs to be brought up to speed on neuroscience. They need professional development on neuroscience. Why? Because we know so much now.
It's one of the reasons why I'm railing so much today is because I actually, and I won't say who, but I spoke to an organization that trains a great number of coaches, a large number of coaches. And the conversation was, hey, here's what I want to do. I'm going to come in and talk about communication parameters and neuropsychology and neurophysiology based on, words we use and the way we behave around children and how there's a different way we can do it. I want to talk about culture building and intentionality and driving values into the process and putting players first. I'm going to do all these. And I laid it all out, all my talks. I laid warriors versus winners. And I got, we rotate through talks like that every couple of years. So we'll call you in a couple of years. And I'm like, you rotate through it. It should be required. Yeah. That's like telling a surgeon, we rotate through the ethics courses, and you all you need to do is be able to cut. You don't need to understand, anatomy or ethics or any of those anesthesiology or any of that, because all you're gonna do is just get in there and cut. It's just, and that right there is like we're unwilling to even look at the science behind it. We're unwilling to look at it. So the comment made by Shelley Full from Safe Sport this week at Project Play was, when you see the Sarah McLachlan effect, when you see the Sarah McLachlan commercial with the beautiful singing and all, and it's coming, they're going to put up pictures of wounded animals and stuff and ask you for money. What do? You turn the channel, and that's what we're doing. We turn the channel. And she says we got to stop turning the channel on this one. We've got to stop normalizing. When you listen to your kids walking around going, oh, if I fail that test tomorrow, I'm going to kill myself, and that's a normal phrase to use, we need to reverse that.
Yeah, that's an incredibly interesting way of putting it, because I think that what happens, and in people that I've spoken to, I've talked to coaches about this and parents about this and organizations about this. And one thing that comes up that I find really interesting is parents in particular will say, do you mean that when I yell at my kid, I'm hurting my kid's brain? And I realized in hearing that really, I think what happens with coaches is, and parents obviously, is they feel afraid. They feel like, oh my God, have I actually been hurting kids and not knowing? Because the truth of it is, we have to go back to that smoking piece. When our parents were smoking, they were not thinking that they were hurting us. There was no way. And when they found out, they fought their addiction. Fighting smoking addiction is incredibly difficult, and many, many people battled it long and hard. And, coaches, they admire toughness. They believe that is the be-all and end-all. Well, I think if we change the messaging and we got coaches to understand, and parents, hey, you might have done damage. Who hasn't yelled at a kid? Every single one of us adults, I think pretty much, certainly me, I've yelled at my kids before. And I didn't do brain damage on that day. I might have shocked them, but unless it's a repeated and unless it's a constant barrage that's linked in and layered with humiliation, calm down. You're not damaging your kids' brains. And coaches aren't either. Coach can have a bad day. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is when somehow the child is not a child in the equation. The child is just a function of the coach's ego or winning, and therefore yelling and humiliation and so on are all linked together. That's when we're in trouble. But maybe if it was messaged more along the lines of, let's not feel sad, but let's go to what you call, I believe, warrior mentality. And let's get coaches excited about hey, we can battle this. We can learn to be incredibly strong people for mental health, not for the dismantling of minds.
Yeah, so I have a couple things to say on that. One is I can't wrap my kid in bubble tape or and expect not to hurt them. I mean, that's the thing. But here's the difference. Like you said, I just saw somebody posted recently that they watched a coach this weekend with 8-year-old girls scream at this girl, every time I put you in the game, you play worse. You're killing me. That right there is one where, as I think any rational human being would say, we probably shouldn't say that, right? Yeah. Or I've heard, if this is how you're going to play, then you can sit your butt on my bench for the rest of my game because you're embarrassing me. First off, you're embarrassing me. It's not about you, coach. But so that we know is abusive, right? But the other kind of stuff is not. And Rick Ankiel was talking at Project Play, and he said, tough love. And so I got into conversations with people later, and I actually texted at him or tweeted at him, and we talked a little bit about it. Tough love is different. And I've had people ask me this, well, how do we give feedback if we can't yell at our kids, if we can't be negative? I said, no, wait, there's a difference. The cornerstone, the keystone, one of the maybe the most important thing in a coaching relationship is connection. If you care about your athletes, you know the saying, if they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If you care about your athletes deeply, you're invested in them and they know this, and you've built that synchronization between the brains because they actually do sync up. Our brains sync with each other. We try to harmonize. We try to create cohesion. We try to mind read. We do all those things if you've worked through Lieberman's work, right? Mm-hmm. When you've created that connection, because we are evolutionarily geared towards connection. It's how we stayed safe when we were being hunted by animals bigger than us. As we stayed in groups, we hunted and gathered together, we huddled together for warmth. There's that piece, right? If you're creating that connection with your athletes, you can say anything you want to them based on the parameters of communication that you have already created and established the standards, and they will take it. When you create a warrior mindset in kids and they know you actually love them, if you lead with love, then you can say things to them that sounds demanding and gets their very best out of them and creates warriors. You don't have to demean them, but you can demand excellence. And that's one of the things I wanted to address. The other thing is you brought up the warrior mindset. When we talk about warrior mindset, everybody wants to say, oh, your way is soft. And I've had people say, well, you're just a good Christian and you're soft and you don't get results. Actually, I get results. That's the thing. I mean, I got the same results as other guys, and I never had to scream at my players or fear-monger my players or throw chairs out onto the basketball court to get my results. Mark Richt at University of Georgia got results. And what did he say to his kicker when the kid was stepping up to hit the game-winning field goal and big money's on the line because his bowl games are on the line and next year's scholarships are on the line and NFL draft placements are on the line and coach's job is on the line? Big money was on the line for this, under 21-year-old kid. They're just kids still at that time. Their brains are still forming. He grabs them and says, regardless of whether you make this or not, I love you. If he can do it big time at that level, we can do it too. Warrior mentality doesn't mean you wrap them in bubble tape or being gentle in the way we speak to our kids or altering the way we speak to our kids doesn't mean you wrap them in bubble tape. It's you change your patterns so you're creating warrior mentality. You use certain words that are building resilience in them, that are activating the analytical brain, that are reducing the fight or flight response. You use words and language that empower them to own the process. And the last thing I want to say is everybody thinks that admitting that you have a psychological issue, okay? My son and I were going over his math problems recently, and he got really upset and really angry. And I said, "Let's work through some techniques to calm down and get your blue head back." And because your red head's taking over, the amygdala is running the show right now, and that dude doesn't need to be in charge of anything. So let's calm back down. And he's like, I don't have a problem. I don't need to see anybody. I don't want that stigma. That's the problem is we put a stigma on that, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody would argue with me that one of the toughest warrior sport